Good morning, everybody. We are now once again live as we are every Wednesday at 10 a.m. We bring you somebody amazing and special to talk about things that are happening right now in our world. Typically, it's a real estate focused conversation, but today we have a very special guest to really talk about a conversation that's been going through everyone's minds for a couple months now. Where every thought process, every stay at home has had its own theories, and everyone's coming up with conversations, and I've been listening to a lot of these things as we continue through the months of being stuck at home and trying to figure out how to continue our lives moving forward. Today, I bring on a very special guest, Professor Dr. Aileen Marty, medical doctor, FCAP, which makes you in the family of doctors of pathology, right? um, Director, FIU Health Travel Medicine Program and Vaccine Clinic Commander, Emergency Response Team Development Professor, Infectious Diseases, Board International Federation for Tropical Medicine, co-editor in chief, One Health, official journal of the International Federation for Tropical Medicine, along with WHO, the World Health Organization Advisory Group on Mass Gatherings, Risk Assessments, Command and Control, EID, Global Health and Security, and my favorite part being a United States Marine for a decade, former naval officer and naval doctor. So thank you for your service, first of all, in the United States military, as well as everything that you've done moving forward, which if I had to read all of that, we'd be here for a couple hours. Thanks for being on the show with me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Dr. Marty, I'm excited to talk to you because, I started this show talking about like all the theories of it. If you leave somebody at home too long, they start coming up with their own ideas on why this is happening, right? So I've heard every conspiracy theory. I've heard, I've heard everything you can imagine. Folks are going, this stuff's fake. They just want our economy to drop, so forth and so on. And you're seeing it on a complete other side. Yesterday, I just told you right now that we were traveling around the country to raise money for child abuse. And yesterday we happened to stay in Binghamton, New York, and we stayed at one of the only hotels that was open there, and it was filled with troops, army troops. And as being a Marine, I said, "What are you guys doing here?" I thought it was because of the current riot situation and protests and so forth. I thought they were National Guard. He said, "No, we're here because we're at a COVID testing center." And I asked him a few questions: "What's it like? What's happening?" So forth and so on. But of course, I'm getting it from the disgruntled army guy that's been there since March, and he just wants to go home now. He's just stuck in a hotel since March. And so I want to get just right into it. What is COVID? Like, and I know people are watching the news and stuff like that, but what is COVID? We understand it to be a virus, but I don't think people truly understand what a virus is. And why is it different than the flu?
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what a virus is. And I think there's many ways to look at it, but the most important thing that you have to know is that it's information, genetic information, either RNA or DNA, never both. If it's both, it's not a virus. It's either RNA or DNA, and it's coated with proteins. That's what a virus is. That's all it is. And it's not really what we would consider a living thing. So when we say a dead virus, we simply mean that the genetic information in the virus is inactive. So we really talk about active or inactive genetic material in a little ball of protein. And in the case of this virus, because it falls into a special category of RNA viruses, there's an envelope that is included that's made from our own tissues. And that makes it a little bit easier to deal with than viruses that do not have these envelopes.
Okay, that's interesting. So are we saying that COVID is a little bit more easier to deal with, or the flu is?
So the flu is an RNA virus, and it's much, much smaller than SARS-2, the virus of COVID. The flu virus is one that it's contagious, certainly, but it's not contagious at the same rate as COVID, nor for as long a period of time, nor with the flu do you see people shedding virus so many days before they have symptoms as you do here, nor for the length of time that people shed virus. And that's another reason why the virus of COVID, the SARS-2, is much more contagious than influenza. So they're both RNA viruses, but they have a lot of differences. The SARS-2 virus is much more infectious. That's the main easy difference to go first. Then we can talk about all the differences that it does within your body if you want.
All right. Well, I mean, let's get into it. Let's get into it because I think, some people have been affected by the COVID. I remember in the first month of our stay at home, there were people, I could see it on social media. Like, does anyone here even know somebody that got COVID, right? Then there's the theories and theories and theories. So what does COVID do to the body? Why is it what it is? Why is it so crazy and critical and so important right now?
Well, let's start with where did it come from, right?
Okay.
So and then as I tell you where it came from, for as far as we know right now, then you'll start to understand why we are where we are. So as you know, the name of the virus is SARS-2, and that the reason for that name is that it's actually very, very similar. It's the same genus and species as SARS-1. It's that similar. The difference is more like the difference between let's say a Saint Bernard and a Great Dane, or maybe
Okay.
than it is between, say, a Saint Bernard and a lion, right?
Gotcha.
So they're very, very similar viruses. And bats in particular have thousands of SARS viruses, many different kinds. And back in 2013, a sample from a cave of one bat, a horseshoe bat, guano, had a sample that was almost the same as the SARS-2 virus that's causing COVID-19. But it was different in one really important area from SARS-2, and that is the area where the virus forms a key to the lock on our cells to be able to get in. So the key is missing teeth, if you will, on
Okay.
that version, so it can't get into the house. It can't get into the cell of humans very well. So that one didn't affect us. Meanwhile, the plot thickens. There were pangolins that were living in a wild animal park more than 1,000 miles away, and these pangolins also carry a SARS virus. Their SARS virus was more different than the one that is causing SARS-2, but it was very similar in the key part. So the key was almost able to get into us. And so what we now see is that the key from the pangolin type virus recombined with the virus that was in bats, and that helped form this new SARS-2 virus. And it did it in a way that was not something we could have predicted from our computer models for how we would, if we were nasty people trying to make a virus that would be very aggressive. It was completely different than what we would have expected, not something anybody would have planned, which is one of the reasons that you can tell that this happened in nature and didn't happen in a lab.
Wow, that's interesting. That's really interesting. It's like almost it is scientific, but it's almost very like a theory movie or a mystery movie where you're taking two pieces of a key, putting them together to create access, right? And so now it accesses us. We're out there. We've learned so many things about this. It stays on paper. It stays on shelves. It stays on books. It stays everywhere. It's almost like don't move. Like just stay exactly where you are. Don't move. Don't touch anything. By the way, hold your breath, right? And so I want to fire off some questions at you and see, where we are today. So does wearing a mask truly help? And does it
Absolutely.
and
That's now been shown without a doubt. Study after study shows that you absolutely decrease the transmission between people if everybody's wearing a face covering.
okay, and then the face cover, does it have to be N95 or can we we can wear any type of face cover, a handkerchief, it's just well covered on our faces.
So remember that the main function of the face covering is to keep me from infecting you,
Right,
not you infecting me wearing the face covering.
right.
So, and that's enough to reduce transmission. So let's think about the transmission of this virus, because I told you it was super infectious. And if you look at the data that came out before we applied any kind of public health measures, like staying at home, like wearing masks, yada, 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 all those things, the reproductive number, the pure reproductive number of this virus was between 3 and 3.9. So let's use the smaller number. Let's go 3. In one generation, one person infects 3.
Okay.
By the next generation, you have 9. By the next generation, you have 9 to the third, right? So your doubling time is radically fast, right?
Right, right.
And this is, but if you can cut off just one of those transmissions, so that first person, instead of infecting 3, affects 2, you've knocked out 12 other infections right off the bat.
Okay. All right.
And that's the way that these face coverings work very effectively, because it reduces the ability for the infected person to transmit to others. And yes, it also protects you, if you're wearing the mask, from the droplets landing on your nose or mouth, which are the main ways in which this virus gets into us.
Okay. Because the virus stays alive on so many other things, things like ordering out, Uber Eats and pickup, how safe is this?
So it does stay on surfaces and for varying amounts of time, but it's not indefinite. It does need a host in order to stay alive for long periods of time. So how long does it stay on the substances that might be on your Uber Eat platform?
Right, your package, because I look at an Uber Eats situation. We've got a chef, we've got a prep person that puts it all together, sets on the counter, possibly in a store that's open for pickup. Then an Uber driver picks it up, puts it in his car, drives it to your house, and hands it to you. So now we're talking about a bag like this that has been handled by 3 to 4 people before it even got to you within the hour.
Okay, so let's take that bag, and here's what I would do if it came into my home. The first thing is, I know I'm just going to assume the bag is contaminated, even though I know that it's still a small chance that it's contaminated, because any given bag, what's the odds, right?
Right.
I just make the assumption it's contaminated, so I know that when I touch it, my hands are automatically going to be contaminated, which means I take off the bag and I throw that away immediately. Then I go wash my hands, because the amount of people that touched the next layer is less than the amount of people that touched the bag. So it's going to be less risky already, right? Then I take the contents and put it onto something I have in the house, right? Something safe, a plate, what have you. So I deplate it out of the original contents and I get rid of those, and I wash my hands again. And then the next step, so I'm washing it off. And every time, and remember I said that this virus has an envelope? Because it has an envelope, it's very easy to get rid of with just soap and water.
That's great.
That's really great. So again, throw away those other containers. You don't need them. Get them out of the way. Now, what I do is I heat up what I got from Uber Eats. So now, if there happens to be any virus whatsoever on that food, I kill it.
What do we call it? So if I put it in the microwave, 30 seconds, I'm good?
No, well, it depends on what the food is, of course, but in the microwave on high for 30 seconds, you'll probably kill off what virus there is. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's good to know, because I microwave everything. My mom doesn't believe in it. So there you go, Mom. Microwave your food. So now, I guess the next question is, did we, understanding how quickly the virus spreads, did we really have to shut down cities and create a stay at home and shut down businesses, or could we have put other policies in place that are similar to what we're seeing now with the 6 feet apart, masks everywhere, like New York City. I'm in New York, New Jersey. It's no mask, no service. You don't come. You come into a gas station without a mask, no service. You know, it's the new norm, as a lot of people are saying. Was it necessary to take it that far? Was it necessary? You know, and I think of this as as I look at it from a real estate side, business side, and I say, wow, you know, I drove through some towns recently that were small towns in upstate New York. I'm talking about between the city and where we are now in Niagara Falls. And the small towns, it was almost like you could see the tumbleweed roll down the street. All the stores were boarded up, they were closed. And I just felt bad in my heart. I understand that there's a reason why, but in my heart, I was like, wow, these folks are, you know, they depend on this small town feeding them, and now no one's coming out to buy anything. No knickknacks, no, you know, if it's not a necessity, no one's buying it, right? So was it necessary to take it that far, or could we have implemented other or other positions to keep us safe?
So let's start with timing. Timing is everything. And remember how quickly this thing reproduces. The reason that we had to lock down is because we didn't act sooner when we could have contained it with intensive case identification, treatment, isolation, and intense contact tracing. And then again, quarantining any of the contacts, as well as following up with them in case they become symptomatic and treating them, etc. Had we done that, we could have reduced the outbreak and never gotten to the point that we needed to do an intense lockdown. We didn't do that. We didn't act fast enough. We didn't have the testing kits fast enough, and we didn't have the political will fast enough. So by that time, you have to then consider, remember what I talked about reproductive number? And by the way, I misspoke because there were actually more cases eliminated by eliminating one. But that's not the point. The point is, what does that reproductive number consist of? So one of the things that it consists of is the susceptibility of the host, right? So the
Right.
more susceptible a host is, the easier it is for that virus to grow in the host. And that's why we do all the things we do to keep ourselves healthy, eat right, exercise, sleep, stay on our meds, all that kind of stuff. That reduces our susceptibility. The next thing that you have to consider is the infectious period. And I already told you that the infectious period for this virus is ridiculously long. That means the
Right.
amount of time that somebody who has the virus is shedding virus and sharing it with others, which tends to be about 2 days before they have any symptoms and can last 10 days, right? So if we could reduce that, that would be great. But to do that, you either need a vaccine, post-exposure vaccine, or you need an antiviral. We don't have those, so that doesn't work. So we're left with two other things, and that's contact time and opportunity for transmission, those two things. So contact time means how many people you're around, period, that may have the virus, right? And for how long you're there. And these two areas are actually very much interrelated, whether there's a transmission opportunity and whether you have the number of contacts that you get exposed to somebody that happens to be positive. Those are controlled by the ways that we're doing now, which include no mass gatherings, so there's fewer people together. That includes the distance between people, so the virus isn't magic. It can't just jump around wherever it wants to. It has to be expelled from a person. And of course, if somebody's coughing or sneezing, then that can be as much as 27 feet. So those people who are symptomatic are riskier, right? Or
Okay.
it's from a contaminated surface. So to do that, we have to do the hygiene and we have to avoid touching our faces, all the things you've heard about, right? The other component to that is this contact tracing, identifying, testing, isolating the cases, quarantining the contacts. Those are the pieces of the puzzle that we can control as a community. And if we can get the number down, as you saw, our reproductive number was going down in the area until very recently. And if you get it down low enough, then you can go back to what we should have done in the beginning, which is strictly dealing with the contacts and everybody else being able to conduct a normal life if they don't have the virus, right? So identifying the cases, isolating them, and as long as all the virus is contained with those individuals that are being treated or isolated or quarantined, then society could go relatively back to normal, with the caveat that this disease has so many asymptomatic spreaders that we still have to have a level of social distancing. Was that too complicated, or?
No, no, it's completely understood. And I guess my next question is, what are how long are we looking at having to be in this position? Cities are opening up. I follow a map on the New York Times, and I just refresh the page every day. And basically, it gives all 50 states, and it has color coding. When you click on the state, it tells you what's open, what's not, right? And I follow this map, and the majority of the United States has a phase one happening at minimum, right? Let me see if I could look at it real quick. And then there are some cities that are on a hold, or some states, I should say, Tennessee, Illinois, Michigan, Pennsylvania, New York, Washington, Oregon, California, that are behind. They're starting some openings, but they're still very much closed compared to the rest of the country. And so I'm assuming these are states that have major cities like New York City, Chicago. Um, you look at California, Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Diego, Portland. When we look at these major cities, I'm assuming it's because of the concentration of people that are there. So as these cities begin to open up and at their own paces, what should we as individuals be taking responsibility on? Like, what should we be looking out for? Because I'm going to venture out and assume there is no time frame for this. We have no idea when this is going to be over. There's no cure, right? So what should we be doing when we're out and about?
So, yes, and this is a big challenge. And what we were hoping to do was to provide rules and guidance for decreasing the risk of transmission and still open up our economy as much as possible, because having the economy down and everybody on lockdown brings its own health problems, let alone economic and social problems.
Right,
So
because we talk about things like obesity and such, right?
all kinds of things, and child abuse like you're dealing with, and
Exactly.
spouse abuse, and all these things that can happen in close quarters. So there are their own risks, not to mention poverty, which can happen because of the lockdowns, brings its own health risks as well, right? So there's an important health reason to opening up the economy. And we were really hoping to do that safely. And that's what we've tried to do, for example, in South Florida, where we studied the issue case by case. In fact, earlier this morning, I was working on a document for how to safely open up NASCAR racing. I mean, every little aspect of every little industry is being looked at to see where their danger points are and how to reduce them and still be able to have the activity or the business or what have you, or the schools. Some are much more challenging than others because of how the virus is transmitted. For example, indoor gyms, those are very, very challenging, because when you are exercising, you're going to be expiring a lot more particles that, because you need to, and you need much more oxygen to come in to be safe when you're
Right.
exercising. So wearing a mask is not a good option in that setting. So it becomes very, very challenging to do that right. And so to answer your question, I'm a little bit distraught right now, because there have been massive protests in the United States, for peaceful protests for the right reason, of course, for what's going on. But because of that, a lot of people have been brought very close together in the middle of this pandemic. And moreover, they were shouting, which of course brings more viral particles out. They experience things like pepper spray, which makes people sneeze,
And cry and
gases
expel
that
much
make
more.
people
Yeah.
cough. So there is a serious risk that our efforts to open up the economy are sort of clashing with another phenomenon that's happening in our country that is going to increase the numbers of cases and is going to complicate doing things right at this time.
That's something that my wife and I were discussing yesterday because we were watching the news. Obviously, we're traveling, so we want to be careful where we're traveling to. And as we're watching the news and we're seeing all the folks on the streets and in close quarters and in their marches or protests, we see how close they are together. And we did notice a lot of people wearing masks. So hopefully that helps, tremendously. But I think you're right. I think we are going to see an uptick in cases because of this, and it's unfortunate because they're out there for a reason, but at the same time they're facing this infectious disease going around. And now, how much longer, Dr. Marty? How much longer are we like this? How much longer? We joked about it before. How much longer is it before I can go back to being a Puerto Rican hugger and kisser?
Yeah, I don't think we're going to be going back to hugging and kissing anytime soon. Much as I regret that because I'm a big hugger myself. Um, and certainly no handshakes. That's in its own way, it's actually very dangerous. Handshaking has always been a wonderful way to transmit flus and colds and diarrhea. Not never was a good practice. Nemesis would be a better idea, but but be that as it may, the reality is here's the challenge. Uh, this is the seventh coronavirus that we know can and can cause disease in humans. There are, as I said, thousands of coronaviruses. Each animal, each mammal has its own set of viruses that circulate and cause disease and cause all kinds of problems. If you look at the community acquired coronaviruses that were circulating in the US prior to this horrible pandemic, and you look at how people reacted to it, we know that immunity to those other kinds of coronaviruses, those better known older community acquired coronaviruses, didn't last long. A few months to a year, maybe a year and a half for most people. Which means that even when we come up with a vaccine, and we will because everyone in the world that
Is
can is
working on
trying
this, right?
to come up with one, and we're trying all kinds of strategies, including brand new strategies that have never been used for human vaccines before. Um, the chances that you will have to take that vaccine repeatedly are extremely high. Simply because the way the immune system interacts with this virus is such that it doesn't lead to lifelong immunity. So,
What about the folks that don't believe in uh, taking these injections? Like, you have folks that don't even vaccinate their children. Uh, so now let's say, and I don't know the numbers, but let's say 60% of people take the vaccine, 40% of people don't. Does that create a bigger problem, or does the
uh,
problem still decrease significantly?
the problem still decreases. Remember what we talked about before with the reproductive number of three. The next
Right,
generation you have three. The following generation you have nine, right? And
right.
it keeps going on from there. So if you knock out a sizable portion of the population by vaccinating them, then the total number of cases will be less. But it's still going to be a big problem for that population, and it keeps the number of potential contacts with the virus higher for everybody if people don't vaccinate. So the other thing that we're all working on as hard as we can is to come up with a good antiviral that we hope that people will be willing to use if they become ill, and that will speed up recovery. There is a little bit of evidence that one of the drugs that's been tested, remdesivir, does decrease the amount of time that people are in the ICU. But even so, That particular one is an IV drug. It's difficult to take and it has its own side effects. So it's not something that we could give to people prophylactically. We're still
Gotcha.
hoping to come up with something that we could use, just like we use malarial pills to keep you from getting malaria when you go to a
Right.
high malaria area. If you're going to a high unvaccinated pool of people. And don't forget this other problem that we run out of immunity, even if we're vaccinated, to coronaviruses in general. So that makes it that much more complicated.
Right. Well, I definitely want to thank you for doing this with me, Dr. Marty. I don't want to keep you longer. We committed to a half hour, and I want to make sure that I get this out as much as possible. I think, and I think people are slowly growing tired of it. So, and I'm seeing it for myself where people who would, let's say, go to the grocery store, they they would go from stripping down in their garages all their clothes and throwing it, and then washing every piece of item that they bought at the grocery store with Lysol and Clorox. And my mom is one of those, right? The Clorox wipes on the gallon of milk and things like that. And I've watched that slowly progress over the last couple months to get home and put the groceries away, right? And so I'm hoping that we get a message out to folks to stay safe. I know people look at me, they say, Dave, you're traveling. How are you doing it? Well, first of all, my wife and I keep our distance from folks. We visited some friends' houses. We've all done as best as we could to keep our distance. We're not going to someone's house who we know is sick, obviously. So, but we've been offered places to stay. I have my alcohol spray. I'm spraying down hotel rooms like it's like a madman. I think, better than anyone in the world. And we're constantly washing our hands and keeping safe. We stop for gas, put on our masks, go into the store, buy what we want to buy, bring it out. We're doing the best that we can for the situation that we're in. And if we want to give any message to folks out there, is to continue to do the same. Do the best you can in the situation that you're in. And I pray that restaurants and stores and places open, even if it's with some guidance and some guidelines. But I know that there's a lot of small business owners that are frustrated that Walmart is wide open, Publix is wide open, Winn-Dixie's wide open, Target's wide open, and their small shop cannot be open. And so, I know those frustrations are out there, but for me, better safe than dead. And so, it's just, you know, because trust me, you're not going to have an opportunity to be sorry about it when you're in that bed. And it's unfortunate. And I know people who have caught coronavirus, have ended up in the hospital. And newsflash, you catch it, you end up in the hospital, you're going to be by yourself because this is the one disease where your family can't come to the room and hang out with you until you're better. You will be there by yourself, and your spouse, your children, you know, God forbid, but it may be the last time you ever saw them the day you walk inside the hospital. So, do you want to leave anybody with a final thought, or everyone with a final thought, Dr. Marty?
Yeah, I want to leave you with a few thoughts. First of all, I want to remind you that it took 170 odd days to go from recognition that there was something going on on December 8th to our first million number of cases. But a few days ago, we went from 5 million to 6 million. In other words, another million people infected in 9 days. And today, just a few days later, we're 6,414,000 odd cases and growing. So this is definitely still with us. The increments are enormous. It's not time to let down your guard. And the most important thing that you need to know is to be aware of your surroundings. Be aware of what you're doing. Pay attention to yourself. Pay attention to what you touch. Pay attention to when you wash your hands before you touch your mucous membranes. The more aware you are of where you are and who you're with, the less your risk is going to be if you follow the simple guidelines that you know are going to reduce your risk for becoming a victim of COVID. And don't forget, many of these people who have recovered are still experiencing symptoms. They're still fatigued. They're still, they still feel somewhat short of breath just grabbing a TV remote. This is not a disease that when you get over it, you're totally over it for the people who have been in the ICUs. So let's all stay safe. Let's remember that I help you by wearing a face covering. You help me by wearing a face covering, and that we can fight this thing together.
Thank you, Dr. Marty, for doing that. Thank you for that message. I really appreciate this. And I wish you a ton of luck, you and your colleagues, with putting this together and keeping us all safe.
Thank you. Pleasure. Take care.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. Like I said, we're here every Wednesday at 10 a.m. with somebody amazing like Dr. Marty. Um, I know this particular. Usually we come to you with a lot of excitement and animation and everything. This particular subject hits close to home, and it's not all good news. So I hope that everybody pushes away from this with a better understanding of what's happening out there. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for checking us out. Make sure you give it a share and show Dr. Marty some love on the comments. Thank you, everybody.